Good morning, cover girls. Had some interesting dental data released this week, and I wanted to highlight some of the facts and figures that I found pretty interesting. We had 60% of dental practices report same-store sales growth in 2024. That's a pretty normal average. You don't want to be in that 40%, obviously. And the only thing that I wish would have been clarified a little bit more was what percentage of same-store sales growth that there was, because we had CPI or inflation of about 3% last year. So you always at least want to keep up with inflation because, again, if you're not keeping up with inflation, especially in an industry like ours where reimbursement rates have been fixed for 30 years, you're definitely going to be heavily in a margin squeeze. But let's unpack that 60% same-store sales growth number a little bit more, because I think we do need to put some context behind that number. Because, and those that follow the channel know that we highlight these a lot, because again, for 3% being the national inflation average, our industry has absolutely felt way more than 3% last year. Rising overhead, most felt in these three buckets: rent, supplies, and lab fees. That, I would argue, is a secondary. Still, the biggest year-over-year increase that we see is rising labor costs, still due to the continued shortage of hygienist assistants and treatment coordinators. And then lastly, reimbursement pressures. Again, like we've talked about, insurance really has not increased the reimbursement rate since the 90s. So think about the 35 plus year of inflationary pressure that is built over that timeline, and see the efficiencies that are now needed in this industry to make it make sense. Another factor that I think is absolutely playing in is, along with the staff shortages, is burnout. It is just really hard when supply and demand is not in balance. And we found ourselves there for almost 5 years now. So it's going to be really interesting to see if we can find that equilibrium again with supply and demand. We released some labor data this week. Jobless claims are up. If you do find yourself in a recessionary environment, normally, unfortunately, unemployment rate goes up with that, and it does draw people back into being in the consumer staple industries, which is more healthcare and some of those things. The discretionary industries have absolutely roared the last 20 years since the printing press really turned on post 2009. So it'll be interesting to see what the macroeconomy can do from a supply and demand standpoint for our industry in terms of labor, but that is to be determined. Another thing that absolutely adds a ton of not only headache, but financial burden is insurance complexities. Having revenue cycle teams, just being able to collect the money that you should be owed from these procedures gets harder and harder and more expensive each and every year. Access to capital and technology can't be overstated. We have seen our x-ray sensors in just 5 years go from 7,000 to 12,000. And again, you can take any single product like that and start putting those figures on it. And we've already been told by our Patterson reps that with some of these tariffs, if they stay in place, we're going to get another 10 to 20% increase this year on our dental supplies. That absolutely shows up on the P&L. And it's another thing that drives just to burnout, because there's so many things that constantly have to be managed and overseen. And then lastly, put a little bow on this video, the market outlook for 2025, 2026. Valuations for dental practices remain solid, especially those with clean financials and growth potential. Looking at EBITDA is absolutely where a lot of these PE-backed DSOs look. Because you have to normalize the provider comp when you're putting a replacement doctor in there. There has to be enough meat on the bone for it to make sense. A very interesting caveat to that statement I just made, though, is Heartland Dental, who is the industry giant, has recently moved in the last 2 years to a de novo-based growth strategy. They before that were all an acquisition-based growth company, and they have 1,500 offices. So if you're going to take that large buyer out of the market, again, it's supply and demand. Without as much buying demand, you will see that with the price. So I think that's something really interesting to watch, because if the industry moves to a de novo based growth strategy, practice valuations will be heavily affected. And to piggyback on that, Dr. Rick Wortman is famous for stating that over 50% of the dental offices in this country are not purchasable based on the health of their financials and the amount of deferred maintenance that is in their practices. So something I think really just to be on the lookout. And unfortunately, I think unless we get a lot of catalysts to change some of these headwinds, I think the dental office consolidation is going to persist, because as we've seen, most offices are maybe keeping up with inflation when they keep up with the total cost of our margin compression. And then you take in the factors of having to work 5, 6, 7 days a week as a practice owner. I just think a lot of the momentum is going to continue to be, how can I partner? Because in today's day and age, it takes an absolute village. And I would not want to be standing alone on an island trying to fight all these fights myself. So comment down below. Let me know what you guys think kind of the second half of 2025 is going to look like into 2026. And let's make it a great day.